Tonight's Modern Men is powered by the Hero Initiative. Are you interested in becoming a hero? Go to heroinitiative.org to see how you could be a hero to those comic creators in need. Hey, what's going on, guys? We are not live tonight. I'm at work right now if you're watching this at 10 p.m. on a Monday. But hey, these guys are awesome. They're like, hey, let's just go ahead and record it because we don't want to do the show without you. So thank you guys so much for continuing to let me be on every one of these shows. I appreciate that. But man, I need to get like a mini comb because I don't deserve like a full-blown comb. But Andy, oh my God, how's the beard?
It's almost worthy. Maybe it'll pick up that hammer when it gets a little longer, right?
Well, luckily this next guy, his arm hasn't been chopped off, and he's not been deemed quite worthy yet of the blue comb. But Drew, how you doing today?
Look, man, I'll use whatever comb I please. The comb maketh the man, apparently, much like the hammer maketh the man. Or the lady. That's right, the lady. Can't wait to get into some ladies.
Yeah, that's right. We're reading Thor Volume something by Jason Aaron.
Volume 4, I believe.
Yes, we're going to talk about confusing numbering tonight. It's been a topic that, for whatever reason, we haven't covered yet, and I think there's a lot of fun conversation to be had on this one. So, and I know Andy's going to speak from experience when the time comes about when he was told, like, hey, go read Thor by Jason Aaron. They're like, this one, no. This one, nope. This one, no. So we're going to have some fun tonight with that conversation. But yeah, we decided to read, or you guys mainly decided for us, actually. All I had to do is put Thor and Jason Aaron on the poll. It didn't even matter which volume was. People just voted for Jason Aaron Thor. And the one we decided to read is the initial story where we get our first glimpse at the female Thor right out of the Original Sin big series. So Drew, actually, I want to toss it to you first. Because it's been a while since I read it, and you probably have better recollection than I do. What in the world happened to Thor in Original Sin?
All right. Original Sin is basically the story of the death of the Watcher. That's right. Somebody comes to the moon and kills the Watcher, and the entire pantheon of Earth and the surrounding spaces heroes are basically like, we got to figure out who done it. Who killed the damn Watcher? Somebody stole his eyeball right out of his freaking head. And then there's this guy, what's his name? The Orb, right? And he's got an eyeball for a head. And he has one of the Watcher's eyeballs. And he just like holds it up and everybody comes for him and it explodes like a bomb. And it's like this truth bomb. Since the Watcher has seen everything, everybody in the universe gets a secret about their life, either revealed to somebody else or revealed to themselves. One of those things that happens caused Nick Fury, who, spoiler alert, killed the Watcher because he was the man on the wall, and now he's the Unseen, which is like the new Watcher. So like white Nick Fury is like crippled and chained to the moon right now. If you guys didn't know what happened to him and why Nick Fury Jr. is the only Nick Fury running around. So yeah, continuity explosion there for you folks. But that Nick Fury, when approached by all the heroes, walks right up to Thor, whispers something into his ear, and at that moment, Thor's eyes go wide. He drops the hammer and is unable to pick it up. And this is because the knowledge that Nick Fury imparted upon him in one quick whisper made him unworthy, made him see himself as unworthy. So this series starts off and everybody's like, whoa, wait. Thor's unworthy? There's a lady holding the hammer. There's like a girl Thor. She's like Thoring around with her breasts out and stuff. And at the same time, everybody's like, well, we're going to finally find out why, Thor was unworthy. Spoiler alert, you don't find out for like 2 more freaking years until he does his own series. The Unworthy Thor, which we should probably read at some point because that's really, really good as well. And you guys said you only read the first volume of this, which means that you don't even know who this Lady Thor is. So you get like no reveals whatsoever. Spoiler alert, it's Jane Foster. That was spoiled for most of the people who weren't reading it before it even happened. But that Thor, he's unworthy as well for a number of different reasons we're not going to get into.
So, Andy, is this your first time reading Thor?
From this, like this new of Thor, yeah, I've read some of the older stuff out of like when I was a kid,
Simon's
but I never, I've known some of that Simonson stuff, but never really stuck to a lot of the big arcs, and never really read enough Thor to really start grasping and holding onto an understanding of the bulk of the character. So this was essentially my first Thor modern read, besides what's currently being put out by Donny Cates. This was a very fun and very enjoyable read, and was not super labor intensive to get through by any means. I think I read this in about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, and I even took my time.
Nice. Yeah, for me, like, I don't read a ton of Thor. Every time I hear Thor anymore, like two names come up. Like, you should either read the Walt Simonson stuff or the new Jason Aaron stuff. I mean, that seems to be the legacy of Thor at this point, in my opinion. Or, you go really old, which we'll get into the numbering fun later. But the only other Thor run I really ever visited and have a hardcover of is the John Michael Straczynski stuff, where they took Asgard. Ragnarok happened, so they built a newer Asgard above Oklahoma. And yeah, that's about all I really remember from that run to the second. So when this one originally came out, I thought it was kind of a neat idea. Like, okay, we finally got a new version of the character. I can buy an issue 1 and kind of decipher a little bit what's going on. Because I did read Original Sin back in the day, and I still never read long enough to see what in the world Nick Fury whispered to. As far as I'm concerned, it was like Bill Murray whispering in Scarlett Johansson's ear at the end of Lost in Translation.
I'll ruin it for everybody at the end of this video.
All right. So yeah, that's
stay tuned. Stay tuned, folks, and I'll tell you what they whispered in Thor's ear.
Stay tuned for that. Oh man.
Stay tuned for the reveal of like the third page of the second issue of Unworthy Thor that came out like 10 years ago at this point.
Yeah,
it's a huge reveal that I'm going to give you guys. Huge spoiler.
At least 5 years, I think. But yeah, I kind of like, this reading this did make me kind of want to revisit the whole Jason Aaron arc, basically, because this serves as a really nice like beginning between going into the Unworthy Thor Odinson and of course the Jane Foster Thor, because after these 8 issues plus an annual are up, then they start to branch off in their own series. So this series kind of acts just to start off to make sure you know where these two characters are at before they're in their own series, basically. So I kind of get why we needed a new Thor #1, and then they decided to go off into a Mighty Thor #1, which is the follow-up series with Jane Foster, and then you have the Unworthy Thor, which is everyone's favorite Thor Odinson being unworthy, and I don't know if he gets the arm back anytime soon or not. But anyway, going back to that,
he's still missing his arm currently in the
really
Aaron's Avengers run. He's still missing the arm, and then Thor, I believe he might have the arm back as part of the Power of Galactus that he got in the Cates run, but I'm not 100% on that until the end of time, where we see Jason Aaron depict King Thor. He's missing that arm. He's missing that arm, and he's missing an eye.
I was going to say, he's probably missing an eye, too. So, yeah, this series basically starts off right after Original Sin. They're on the moon. There's a newly christened Asgardia, and it seems like Thor's mom is almost taking more of a leadership role than, his dad at this point. So, just kind of right there, you see the feminism right on the page, where his mother Frey has taken this much larger role instead of just kind of being this background character, similar to what she, kind of was in the first Thor movie, to be honest. So you see her, kind of even argue more, with, God, I can't remember his name right now, Thor's dad. And Thor, he's just sitting there being mopey on the moon. He's growing his beard back out. He's trying to pick up Mjolnir. It's just not working. No one can pick it up at all up until they finally all just give up. And a mysterious figure comes and picks it up. And that's kind of where we get our first glimpse of Lady Thor. But as that's all going on, Thor's just trying to pick a fight back on Earth because the Frost Giants are invading. And he ends up losing an arm because he's tired. He's frustrated. He's just been mopey. So what did you guys kind of think of this opening sequence where Thor gets that arm lost? Was it pretty justified or was it just like kind of gimmicky?
I mean, I don't know about justified. It's kind of one of those things where it shocked me. I'm like, really? This is playing out? This is happening? They weren't kidding when they said he was worn out and he was tired, that he's going to allow the Frost Giants to hold him down like that and then get his arm chopped off, because it's just not something that happens to Thor, right? This opening volley in the book was a ton of fun, though. I definitely loved the murder sharks. I loved that the Frost Giants were coming out of some deeper nether realm in the ocean that nobody could track them in until it was too late, and they completely smashed this underground or underwater research laboratory. That was a lot of fun, and then it played out to Thor losing his arm, and I was kind of taken aback. I was kind of shocked, actually. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, what about you, Drew? What did you think of the first issue?
I think I really love how this fits into the whole of Jason Aaron's story now that it's complete. I was reading the God of Thunder run that he wrote previous to this. I read Original Sin, which Aaron wrote, and Thor's part to play in that is a linchpin, not so much in Original Sin, more in how Thor's overall story takes place. And going back and re-experiencing this kind of in the middle, it's a little bit of a lighter story than a lot of the other Thor that you're getting around this era. But at the same time, there's this dark side to it, this depression in Thor, because he can't lift the hammer. Odin's son can't lift the hammer. And it's his own mind that's keeping him from being worthy. He's one of those characters. We talked about it with Daredevil not long ago, where each arc, it seems like they take something away from this hero and he needs to go on this journey. But that's not unlike Thor in any other capacity. I mean, the origin story of Thor on Earth via Marvel Comics was that, you know, Odin stripped him of his power and he was just a man and he found the hammer and he ended up being Thor all along. Like that was the crux there. And the Simonson run is all about Thor having to prove his worth, his worthiness throughout all these different trials. It's one of those things that he does. And the fact that this whole run, he gets worse and worse. You think he's bad here. Like when you get to Unworthy Thor, it's bad. The guy is like, he's like tears in his beer is bad. You know, the whole there's giant Marvel events that happen where, you know, like, well, how's Thor going to figure into this? And somebody's like, he's just drunk right now. Don't even call it. He's just drunk as a skunk right now. And the fact that when you see him as King Thor in the beginning of Aaron's run, and he's missing the arm and he's missing the eye and he's his body, the scars of his body tell the tales of his failures and his ultimate triumph by overcoming those failures. So I really dig that this is kind of just him in a low point where he's just like, I just don't like, I don't care anymore. Nothing good can happen. We've all had those days where turd after turd after turd happens. And just at the end of the afternoon, you're just like, fuck it. Whatever happens, happens. I'm just going to let sweet death take me at this point. And that's kind of what his mindset is here. And I dig getting back to that point because he's come so far as I've read the entire run.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read the whole Aaron Thor run, but I could just tell that's where he's going to go with this story, even at this point. He wants to do that hero's journey, basically. So he just, you know, subtracts all of these elements away from Thor that make him like this, like, big badass hero we're used to. We have to kind of see him, slowly build everything back up. Meanwhile, you've got this other character who, you kind of find out later how stripped down and, and how bad shape she's in. And then you get to see her all of a sudden have this miracle happen to her, and she takes full advantage of it. So there are two nice, like, yin and yang style tales that are being told specifically in this first volume that I think do themselves even more favors later on. But my next question for you guys is, to prove her worth as, a hero, she has to fight several villains. Like, there's a lot of villains in 5 issues worth of story here. So you have this Dario Agger guy who's the CEO of this company, and he's also like this like demon, like whatever type thing. I'm not even sure what he's supposed to be.
Minotaur.
He also uses magic. And then you have Malekith, who's like the main dark elf, and then you have all the frost giants, and they're like all fighting over this like ice skull of some sort. So I gotta be honest, between all of these villains and whatever they were doing, I kind of got lost in their plot a little bit, as you can kind of tell as me describing it. Like, at the end of the day, I just cared more about the rise and fall of the Thors rather than what Malekith and these other characters are doing. So what did you guys think of the use of the villains? Andy, I'll go ahead and start with you.
I thought it was a very interesting way to provide multiple facets of a challenge for a new Thor. Basically, she arrives back on Midgar, Pacific Island or Pacific Ocean's completely frozen over from the frost giants, and they've begun to create a frozen staircase up to this research island, if you will. Well, the staircase is full of heroes from Asgard and other places that have gone to try to battle the frost giants. She gets to the top, and there's the Avengers frozen and Spider-Man, and she's like, well, these guys didn't make it. How am I going to make it? That was an interesting take to show that, she's got a battle ahead of her. And really going into it, it's just kind of hilarious how the frost giants bicker back and forth. And then when Thor introduces himself, or both Thors are there, if you will, Odin's son and then Lady Thor, they start bickering between themselves too. And then he starts to realize that she's utilizing the hammer in ways that he had never thought or dreamt of, and the hammer's responding in a way that it had never done for him. And then it really sets in for him that the hammer chose her. And she actually disposes of the frost giants quite easily. Dario is quite interesting. He kind of wants to hide and then kind of wants to fight. How'd you pronounce it?
Malekith.
Malekith. He seemed to wanted to be less into the fray of things and more into the backside or backstory of that. But I don't know how to really deep dive further into it. Besides, it was pretty interesting because it was like 5 different layers of challenge for her to be approached kind of like 5 different ways. But my favorite part of the book is when they introduce Dario, and he says, perhaps it's time to consider evacuation, seal off the floors 1 through 5, activate the hydrochloric sprinklers, turn the air conditioning to cyanide dispersal. But sir, won't that kill all the personnel on these floors? Not anymore. I want them all fired. And by that, I mean, use the napalm. So this guy's just totally ruthless. And it's just hilarious the way they introduce him like that.
What about you, Drew? What did you think of these villainous characters here?
I think that it basically fulfilled Aaron's promise. When this first came out, it was very controversial. As one of those, they're going to gender swap the character. Oh, this is a feminist book. Oh, this is not my Thor. And that's all the reaction before the book came out. That's all in this book. It's not missing. It's definitely there. There's a lot of female empowerment in this book. There's a lot of feminist agenda from a male writer. Like, hate that if you want to, but at the end of the day, these kind of villain of the week stories leading up to a bigger villain reveal after a bigger villain reveal. It's like one thing leads into the other. So these stories are all kind of connected, but they're not at the same time. They're kind of villain of the week stories. And And you're getting that, hammers and thunder that you want from Thor. You're getting the action. You're getting, him fighting villains is being replaced by her fighting villains. There's still that story being told behind the scenes with Thor being stripped of all his power and becoming Odinson. And with this character, the spoiler alert, Jane, and what she's overcoming. We talked about that earlier, but it's just, there's nice, fun comic book adventure to be had in this volume.
Yeah, absolutely. And, going into the next part that Andy mentioned is where you finally get Thor versus Thor. So you kind of figure like maybe this is something they take a little bit longer to build up. But at the same time, I'm glad we just kind of got out the gate, because that's the type of character, in my opinion, Thor is. He's just, straight to business once to get this out of the way. So once he hears about a new Thor, obviously he's going to go investigate immediately. So he, of course, just like when he lost his arm, he's still like thinking like a fool rather than thinking smart here. Like all it takes is for Mjolnir to kind of tap him on the shoulder, even says tap, and then that's all it takes to really set him off. So what did you guys think about this fight between the two Thors?
I enjoyed it. It's almost like a passing of the torch, if you will, so to speak.
Yeah.
And like you said, the hammer just tap, that one panel that says tap, and then it just sets him off and lights him off. I'm like, that's pretty characteristic of Thor. And the response was almost expected. And I'm glad it went down the way it did, because if it had gone down any other way from what I've read in Thor, just any other Thor stories and what I know of the character, it just wouldn't have felt the same. And then you're passing that torch from old to new, so to speak. So getting that remembrance or that reminder of how he reacts and how he feels and how he thinks, and then passing that torch on to her, I think that was a really, really good way. It kind of had a deeper meaning to it if you've read far enough into it. But even if you didn't, it was still very enjoyable at the, the surface glance, so to speak.
Yeah, I definitely like this scene here at the end of their fight where Thor, he just wants to know who this new Thor is. So at first he questions if it's the strongest woman he knows in his life, which would be Freya, his mother. And then Thor proceeds to kiss Odinson. And he's like, do I still think I'm your mother? He's like, I certainly hope not. Definitely enjoyed that scene. So Drew, what's your take on all this?
I think that the meeting of the Thors has like kind of a threefold effect to it. And that is like, yeah, of course, the passing of the torch, but it's also Aaron saying she's Thor and he's not. Very much, very clearly, she is more powerful than he is at this moment. She has Mjolnir. Also, this is kind of the first time they kind of explore Mjolnir as having a personality. And that's just kind of a small thing that's happening here. And it becomes a much bigger part of this whole story. Mjolnir has its own personality. And that is a theme that gets explored in the future of this series. And also, Thor just came off of God of Thunder, where we got to see Thor and young Thor teaming up with old man King Thor. And the Thor versus Thor, him proving himself against himself, is something that constantly comes up throughout this giant multi-year arc, multi-series arc that Aaron does with Thor. There's those creators out there that are intrinsically tied to a character. Scott Snyder will always be seen as a Batman guy. Grant Morrison will mostly be seen as a Batman guy. Joshua Williamson is going to be a Flash guy. And Jason Aaron's the Thor guy. It's just the way it is. You think of Simonson, you think of Thor. You think of Jason Aaron, you think of Thor. That's just kind of the way it is. And he does a lot of deep dives and explorations. And this being a #1 issue, there are a lot of themes that he sets up in here, and themes that he carries through the entire thing. And I think that more than anything, though, it's her throwing down the gauntlet and being like, "You are not, and I am."
So kind of one of the last scenes I wanted to touch on here is in that, like, there's like that issue 5. I don't want to call it a filler issue because it does kind of establish where Odin's head is at toward the end of this, and I guess really Frey as well when they're talking on the moon. But you kind of get to see Odinson sitting in the bar. He's all sad, but then he bumps into his girl, Lady Sif. And, they're kind of being, Thor and Sif type relationship. But somehow it ends up with he's like, hey, by the way, are you Thor? And he just gets a drink thrown in his face. So what did you guys kind of think of Lady Sif's take on all of this?
I like the fact that she finally feels like, she's always been an equal personality-wise with Thor, but always had that, Thor's always had kind of the authority over her, and she's just kind of like, you're not worthy, drink in your face. I dug it. I thought it was great.
I enjoyed it. I don't have a deeper understanding like Drew does of the history of the characters and how they intermingle, but at face value, at what it was just to see how offended she was to even think that he would think that. And then
that's what I initially thought. I initially thought it was going to be Sif.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, well, yeah, that's kind of like what she's always been. They took the like for all of Marvel now, Journey into Mystery was the title, and it's basically a Beta Ray Bill of the Sith book.
They did a really good job outlining the facial characteristics of when the darkened character picked up the hammer and the blonde hair. There was enough there to make me realize that, well, it's not going to be her because she's different facial characteristics and facial outline, and the brunette hair made me think it wasn't her, but I guess there could have been
a magical hammer can probably give you highlights.
I
don't know how that fashion stuff works, but
yeah, I just like how I had Loki on his list. But then again, you have to ask yourself: was like Loki a little boy at this point? Was he actually female at this point? You never know. It's Loki.
He was, he's all of them at the same time.
Yeah. So yeah, I felt like his list was just like every female in Asgard he knew plus Loki.
Right.
I thought that was pretty. And then Jane Foster.
Foster.
Like at least he could say he had the right answer written down somehow.
Angela.
Yeah, absolutely. So that pretty much
there was talk about it being Angela as well because she had just come back and was not as big a hit as they kind of expected her to be. I don't believe. So a lot of people saying, well, they'll just make her Thor and that'll give her a reason to be. And I'm glad that they didn't because I like what they did with both of those characters.
So the closing moments of the first volume is, you have your ultimate man, Odin. He wants his hammer back. He can't even pick up the hammer. So what does he do? He not only does he recruit his brother, who's the god of fear, but he also has recrafted the destroyer to kind of go after the hammer. So I think a nice little cliffhanger to end the first volume here. So Andy, would you read the second volume?
Yeah, and I almost tried to squeeze it in before we started recording tonight.
Nice.
But I had a couple of things to knock out, and I'll probably read it later tonight. The right things are going.
Awesome. I know for me, it makes I still need to read the Unworthy Thor. I kind of obviously since I have the hardcover, I didn't read the second volume because time and sleep and such. But I liked it so much, I at least got it double signed there by both creators. But I do still need to read the Unworthy Thor. But as for the Jane Foster stuff, I read most of her art through the Mighty Avengers and the Marvel Legacy renumbering, and it is a very nice arc. I enjoyed, especially the ending. It's very touching. It's one of the more emotional endings to, how a character, has to step down and all that stuff. And I know she's in the Valkyrie book now, which I think John's Comics with Kids, if I remember right, he's a pretty huge fan of that one as well. Drew, I'm sure you've read that one as well. So, Drew, any final thoughts on the Jason Aaron Thor run before we get into our final scores?
It's hard for me to score this accurately because I read the whole, like the all of it from God of Thunder all the way through Original Sin, through all the Jane Foster stuff, back through the Mike Del Mundo art run on volume 5, which a lot of people are hit or miss on, all the way through War of the Realms and then King Thor, and it all wraps up in a nice little bow before Donny Cates is like, hey, we're doing something completely different. But I think that all of that character development over that long period of time for all of these characters just kind of makes it kind of wishy-washy for me to go back and look at this volume out of the whole. I would say it's nowhere near my favorite chapter of this epic encyclopedia of continuity. But it's the first like Russell Dalterman art, which is like the art we completely glossed over.
Right,
how
yeah, we did.
God damn gorgeous this book is. The line work is clean and knows when to take a back seat to the color and the form, and just the way that he manipulates form with line is just it's on another level. And I it's kind of hard to describe how it works, but it's very much the way that Asad Ribic works, I believe, as well. But he has more of a painted finish to his stuff. So I think that it fits really well with Aaron's storytelling with Thor here. You got these bright, beautiful colors that you get from the Jack Kirby Cosmos. But it's like a lot of pastels and softer tones and just I love the way that this book comes together. The presentation on it is amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I really like Russell Dalterman's art as well. I think when picturing the Jane Foster Thor, like he's about the only one I can picture drawing it. I think Jorge, who did the other art in issue number 5 here? Jorge Molina did the issue 5 art, which was fine, but I just was like, man, where's Dalterman at? I definitely wanted to see him in that issue 5, but yeah, I completely agree. I really like Dalterman's stuff with Lady Thor.
I would say as a whole on the Thor, the Mighty Thor, all the stuff that he did with Thor, fill-in issues stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
It's like the Molina stuff is good. It's just not as good.
It just doesn't fit quite right.
Exactly. I'll just wait. The annual has some Rob Guillory in it. And you know his art style. He's not changing it for anybody. It's his own great style, but he is in that annual.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think it's mainly the Frog Thor for whatever that character's name is.
Throg.
Yeah, there we go. All right. So let's go ahead and get to some final scores here. So Andy, I'll go ahead and start with you.
I'm going to go ahead and land this right at a 9.2 for me. As being a first-time reader of this, the first introduction to this arc and Dalterman. And the reason why it wasn't higher was just that segue from issue 4 to issue 5 was a very stark, different style of art. Molina, like Drew said, Molina's art is fantastic, but it was almost like playing with a set of Legos and then finding out that one of them just didn't fit your build, didn't fit you can't complete what you wanted to do now because it just didn't fit in right. And it is gorgeous. But it was interesting that they chose the last issue in this book to change and move to a different artist, which felt like it changes the flow of the story. It changes the story quite a bit. It feels that way. So that's why I've got it landed at a 9.2. It was a great opening volley, in my opinion, and it left me wanting to sit down and read the next volume immediately.
All right, what about you, Drew?
I feel like I'm going to give this like a Silver Age grade, right? So because I enjoyed it so long ago and I'm going back to enjoy it again. I think it's a 9.4, but unfortunately, I don't know how it was stored because it's got off-white pages. It's just not quite as good as the rest of the Thor around it, in my opinion. I thought that the second volume, I read this time I reread it, I read it until the helmet came off and the reveal was revealed. I thought that's where we were ending this. So I just kept reading until that happened. And I think that second part of this story is much better than the first. And maybe that is a little bit of judgment there, but I think this is great, man. One of my favorite runs of all time. I just think that this isn't the best chapter in that run.
I think for me, I'll go 9.2 as well, Andy. Maybe we'll give it in vein of Drew's random grade here. I'll give it a red label, uncertified, signed book. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think it is a very solid building block to what Jason Aaron wanted to do. Like you could tell, like this volume in particular, like I said, you get your Lady Thor. You see what's going on with Thor Odinson, the Unworthy Thor, and it allows them to branch off into their two separate books. Would I have rather them kept this going with Jane Foster and then maybe keep the new Unworthy Thor with Thor Odinson? Yeah, sure, but hey, we're going to get into that here in a second. But yeah, overall, really like the quality of this run. I think it was very ballsy for them to try a big twist with this character, and I think it paid off dividends in my opinion. So, actually, my last question before we move on: does this make you guys want to see a movie with Natalie Portman as Thor?
Mm.
I want to see a movie with Natalie Portman doing anything. Sorry. She is one of my favorite people in the world. I will watch her read the phone book. I think that her raps on Saturday Night Live's digital shorts are the best thing that Saturday Night Live has done in 30 years. She revs my engine.
Not mine. You go back and, like most other people, my first introduction, my real big introduction to Thor was the first Thor movie, right? Besides some of the Simonson stuff that I read as a kid, that first Thor movie, Natalie Portman, I think did well in that role. As the movies continued to progress, I don't know what happened, but things just didn't get better for me watching her. It's just, and then the one time, the San Diego Comic-Con reveal of her holding the Thor's hammer on stage, she looked malnourished and unhealthy, in my opinion.
Yeah, she's gonna have cancer in the movie.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it'll fit actually. Yeah,
I don't know. I gotta see more. I've never really cared for Natalie Portman, and many.
I care for her deeply.
I'm not saying maybe I should rephrase that and say a lot of the roles that I've seen her play in, they weren't really my favorites, and they didn't really win me over. It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see where they take this and where it goes then.
Yeah, as long as we get V for Vendetta and Natalie Portman and not episode 1, 2, and 3 Natalie Portman, I think we'll be fine.
Agreed.
All right.
Before get some Black Swan, Natalie Portman.
I know you guys.
Wow.
You like some Jason Aaron. And you know what? I'm going to use that share screen to show you guys an opportunity where you can talk with Jason Aaron. So let's hit that share screen here. And then we're going to go. We're going to hide this.
We're going to go into the portal.
So if you go to heroinitiative.org/merchandise, guess who just happened to be on this week's list? Jason Aaron. You can have a Q&A and chat with Thor Avengers writer Jason Aaron for a $100 donation to the Hero Initiative. And you know who else is really awesome that was just added? You have another chance to talk to Greg Rucka for a $125 donation to Hero Initiative. And, I mean, Brian Michael Bendis is back for another writing class.
Ooh, Matt Wagner sketch.
Yeah, Matt Wagner sketch for $350 plus a chat with him. He does some high quality sketches for these opportunities. So
I might have to put Mage on one of these lists one day.
Andy Smith, and then Marketing 101 with the guys from Top Cow. So just some other great opportunities. And then Drew, I want you to talk about this next one because it's coming right up.
Mainframe Comic-Con. Man, there is so much going on at Mainframe Comic-Con. Do me a favor, Seawood, if you want to scroll up, screw these guests right here. I mean, there's plenty of them. Click that schedule button for me, if you will. Bam. Saturday, we've got 4 halls, 8 live hours of programming on 4 different channels. All of them will be embedded on the website where you can scroll up to the top there, Seawood. You can click one of those hall A, B, or C, or D buttons. Click one of those for me there. Bam, and there's the player. It's embedded. We got 4 days, 18 hours, 56 minutes, and 26, 25, 20. That's how many seconds we got there left to go till Mainframe Comic-Con. We got meet and greets on the site where you can purchase meet and greets with different actors and celebrities. Robert Wall. We have Shang Tsung's on there. Phil Lamar. John Stewart, the Green Lantern. Not to be confused with other Green Lanterns. The voice of Wonder Woman. The voice of Hawk Girl, who is also the mom on Wizards of Waverly Place. Come on, man. If you ain't a Wizards of Waverly Place fan, I don't know who you are. There's some really great stuff going on. We've got con exclusives as well. There's an exclusive cover for Broken Gargoyles from Source Point Press. There's a where you could have an exclusive pre-order for the Monstrosity game. There will be a live demo of that with the Broken Gargoyles team. They will be playing Monstrosity live on Mainframe Comic-Con. You can also get a throw pillow, a button, a sticker. If you want to waste your money on mainframe branded crap, we've got your tchotchkes, folks. You can get tchotchkes. There's going to be also a whole lot of different opportunities for purchases through Artist Alley and our vendors, which that will be loaded up on the site day of, and you'll have access to those. Man, so many great panels. We're doing a Justice League voiceover panel with the entire cast of the original animated Justice League cartoon, including Lex Luthor, Clancy Brown, or as I know him, Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs is coming to Mainframe Comic-Con, people. Mr. freaking Krabs. You know what? I told my dad that Mr. Krabs was coming, and he was like, "All right, now I'm excited for you."
Is that
Dude, that's freaking Batman. The Batman is coming to Mainframe. Dude, Tom Taylor is coming to Mainframe to talk with Taylor Hershine, or Trevor Hershine, I'm sorry, about Deceased. We got Donnie Cates is coming to talk about Thor and crossover. Greg Rucka will be talking Old Guard again with us. We've got Al Ewing is going to be doing a panel. Kevin Eastman. We're doing a fantastic 4DX podcast, which is Dan Fogler's podcast. He's going to be doing a reunion of The Walking Dead. Chip Zdarsky, Colin Bunn, the team from Kanto. David Pepos is doing some great announcements, and he's also doing a panel about Hollywood IP. We've got Heavy Metal Magazine is talking about IP in the COVID era. We've got a lot of different talent from AWA is doing 3 different panels with us: a crime and comics panel, a horror comics panel, a future of AWA panel. We've got the humanoids panel, where we're going to get Mark Wade, who's the new publisher of the English-speaking humanoids arm, and they're talking about H1 and their shared universe that they're bringing out. We got Zach Kaplan, Point of Earth, is going to be doing a panel. It's just we're overflowing with content, guys. It's going to be 4 panel halls, 8 hours long for 2 days, man. That's just, come on, dude. Come on. That's just so much content. We've got some great hosts coming to help us out. John Suntress from Word Balloon Podcast. If you guys haven't checked out Word Balloon Podcast and you consider yourself a fan of comic book creators, you're doing yourself a disservice. John knows everybody. He's just one of the best. Fantastic guy and a fantastic podcaster. If you check out his podcast, every single episode is chock full of great content. Be sure to check that out. We've got panels about variants. We got a kids comics panel. We've got Jupiter Jet. The team from Jupiter Jet is going to be hanging out and doing a spotlight panel. They're also going to be doing a podcasting panel. They do the Geek History Lesson podcast, so be sure to check that out. And Tom Merritt, who's was a CNET host forever, and it's been on like 40 different podcasts. This guy knows his stuff. So if you want to know more about podcasting, check that out. There's just so much content. I just can't tell you guys all about it. Like Ahoy Comics, we got Source Point, we got Mad Cave Studios, we got Heavy Metal, we got what's the other one? You name a publisher. Top Cow, we've got a panel from Top Cow. You name a publisher, guys, out there doing their thing. Apparently, we're working on putting together an Archie panel as well. And there might be some pro wrestling. Chad is working on locking all that down, and that should be hitting the schedule soon. So there's going to be something for everybody at Mainframe, more so than ever before.
All I know is there are so many guests, my finger is sore from scrolling through that whole page of guests. So what a awesome con coming up. I cannot wait for this Saturday. So absolutely. So it's only the 3rd Mainframe Comic-Con, so not too much confusing numbering going on with the Mainframe Comic-Cons. But
we've already rebranded to just Mainframe after Mainframe 2. So
oh wow.
We've already renumbered, Seawood.
Hey, I used to age with the WrestleManias, by the way, and I knew I was old when they stopped numbering WrestleMania.
Oh my.
But anyway, numbering. So comic numbering, it's a fun thing to talk about. It's something that at the end of the day, what sells a comic better than any cover or any writer or anything ever could? Sometimes it's just the number one. So, unfortunately, I think a lot of these companies realize that, and they will find any excuse to give you a new number one possible. Maybe not even a number one. As my first example I came up with in confusing numbering actually goes all the way back to the Silver Age. Which, oh my God, we're talking about Silver Age on Modern Men. But anyway, I feel like all this confusion kind of started back then with Marvel and their Silver Age numbering. When you think about Captain America, Hulk, Thor, those books, like when those first launched into like Captain America, it wasn't like Captain America issue 1 in the Silver Age. It was like issue 100 all of a sudden. It adapted from another story. And then Hulk, what was it, 102, I think? And then, yeah, so they all had their stuff. But what confuses me the most is the Doctor Strange and Strange Tales one. So when Doctor Strange got his own first title, they gave him the Strange Tales line. So it went Strange Tales 168, Doctor Strange 169. However, there is also a Strange Tales 169, which I believe is the first appearance of Brother Voodoo. So how in the world did we get a book that splintered off and then it splintered off into itself somehow and kept going? So I don't understand. It took me forever to figure that one out. I still don't know if I truly have that figured out. And please, guys, in the comments below or in the premiere chat, like if you guys have any thoughts or if my facts are all over the place, please feel free to correct me, because like I said, the reason I want to talk about confusing numbering is because it confuses me at the end of the day. So, Andy, I want to hear your experience trying to figure out what we're going to read this week. So I kind of was saving it for this topic instead of the previous one. So you want to tell the fine people watching at home how much fun you had trying to hunt this read down?
Oof. So we put the vote up for Jason Aaron's Thor. And literally in your guys' head, well, is just read the first volume. I'm like, okay, first volume of what? And they're just, well, Thor, Jason Aaron's Thor. And I'm like, okay. So I'm researching online. And I'm getting conflicting information. I'm like, what's going on? Well, Carson's got a hardcover. Drew, you had a hardcover, right?
No, I've got all the single issues, but I read it digitally.
So on the hardcover, it actually lists a different number of issues, and it lists a different. No, it lists the same date. It listed a different number of issues, though. But then when I go into my LCS to try to find some help, there's 3 different volumes of Thor #1, all with different titles, but the years on the back show different years as printing years: 2015, 2018, 20. So originally we figured it out that it was the 2014 numbers 1 through 5. If I remember correctly. And Carson, your hardcover says 1 through 8 on it, plus the annual, I think.
Yeah.
And it made for a whirlwind of an hour's worth of hunting in the LCS through the trade section to find the right one. And then I think I messaged you 3 or 4 times. I was like, is it this one? You're like, no. Is it this one? No. Is it this one? No. Well, it's because the trades all have different covers than the hardcover, and the hardcover and the trades all have different covers from the single issues. And so you've got Aaron and Daughterman on 3 volumes of 3 #1 volumes in Thor, I think, over the last over 3 or 4 years. I think
it's 2 volumes plus
there's only one actually, and that's this one. The other one's called Mighty Thor.
But on the trade paperback,
this is Thor volume 4.
Yeah, but on the trade paperback, when you're looking at the racks, it says Aaron Daughterman volume 1.
Yes, this is volume 1 of volume 4.
There's 3 of those, all with different covers at my LCS.
They have different covers? Well, they're varying covers.
Well, no. The trade paperbacks were all different stories inside of them, but they all said Aaron Daughterman volume 1 on the bottom. One was the Mighty Thor. One was this one that we just read, and then there was
that's the one. Mighty Thor.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't. It's just. It was. Oh my god. It was mind numbing to figure it out, because we had talked about it and Carson's like, just find this one. And that was the one I needed to find. But then it got so convoluted when I was looking at it online for Comixology. And then I was like, well, let me go to the LCS and just buy it and see if they could help me out. And at the end of the day, I did find the right one, but good Lord, that was a lot of work.
Yeah, I thought about pranking at the beginning of the show after we went into the recording and be like, by the way, Andy, that's not the right one.
Not the right one.
I was totally prepared for that too, because I'm like, they're going to say this wasn't the right one.
So yeah, especially once trades get involved. That's what I didn't even put in my notes for this topic. Like, there are so many like random trades, like because you go from the trade, then the hardcover usually collects the first two trades, and then you'll have some sort of Supreme Ultimate Absolute Edition that collects God knows what, and then they'll reprint the first trade, and it'll have different numbering, and I think that just adds even further to the confusion than anything. But I think
you can't really consider collected editions when talking about numbering. You have to look at the floppies and the way they're originally released, because like a volume 1 can contain two trades if it's collected in a different manner. So that throws a whole nother can of snakes on the fire.
Yeah. One I know all too well.
I think where all these gimmicks stem from, though, I talked about the Silver Age stuff, but once again, when you think gimmicks in comics, you got to go back to the 90s, in my opinion. So when you get to the 90s, you have zero numbers, Wizard 1/2s, negative numbering, -2s, -3s, alphas, omegas. By the time you get down to it, like, when do you keep the regular book going if you're doing all these other things? So, Drew, do you have any fond memories of buying any of this stuff?
Look, tangents right here. I'm going to go on a tangent about alphas and omegas. Okay. Let's just one series that came out within the last 10 years was Black Vortex, was a crossover. They do alphas and omegas for crossovers, which is great because you get one issue that tells you where everything starts. You get one issue that tells you where everything ends. And those issues normally have a checklist in the back of them that say, these are the stories you need to get along the way. I dig that. But here's the thing, like Black Vortex, right? X-Men, Guardians of the Galaxy, an all new X-Men, Guardians of the Galaxy crossover. Right, with like 2 Nova issues, right? Where the hell do I put Black Vortex Alpha and Omega? Do I put it in its own little section? Like, am I supposed to pull all those crossover books and put them together in my Black Vortex? You know what? I got to buy doubles so I can get my Black Vortex section. Like, that annoys the ever living shit out of me. Just put a fucking name and a number on it and tell me where the hell to store it in my boxes. But as far as things like the Zero issues and the Wizard 1/2s, they're just nice little retcon prequel issues normally that fit in like right before something happened. I dig those issues, and there's something fun about having a cheesy 90s book like right in front of like a Silver Age book where the run actually starts. But this is what happened beforehand, with according to a Wizard 1/2. I like that. I dig that. I don't have any problem with the numbering either because I pay such close attention to the continuities that I read as they come out. And I think that when they're coming out, you know what came right before it. There's no question for me that what we read tonight was the Thor that came right after the original Sin arc. So it's like, oh, Thor 1, which one? Right after Original Sin. Like, I can place that in my mind. And I don't have trouble wrapping my mind around the fact that there's 2 Aaron Dauterman #1s, because one's called Thor and one's called The Mighty Thor. One is a 1-word title, the other is a 3-word title. And so you can't go into seeing The Mighty Thor and Thor as the same title, because there's 5-6 volumes of
if it's your introduction,
6 volumes of Thor right now, right? Donny Cates is Thor volume 6. If Donny Cates did another volume of Thor, it would still be volume 6, right? If he changes the name and gives it a new #1, that becomes a new volume of a new book, whether it be the same continuity or not, right? So it's like when they split X-Men and Uncanny, right? You follow Uncanny's numbering never stopped, but X-Men started over at 1. See what I'm saying there? So it's like there are 2 different titles now. And they can go. And the reason they did the Mighty Thor is because the Unworthy Thor was supposed to be coming out concurrently and got delayed. And then after that, the Odinson book was called Thor because the Odinson book is Thor, and Odinson is just as much a part of this volume of Thor as Jane is, if not more. And in Mighty Thor, Odinson barely shows up.
if you got a full grasp on the continuity and a full understanding of things that are happening, sure, it could be easy.
Yeah.
If you don't, it's a nightmare.
I think it's not so much the renumbering as much as it's the way that these things are collected. I think it's the fact that they reprint the collections so often, and there's not like Image does a great job with their trades, right? And
Yeah.
I would say that for the most part on big titles, the big two do good on their trades. But if it's something that maybe doesn't sell well in the first trade and gets canceled in the second series, and then they try to reboot the character again, and there's another number one, I can see where that gets confusing, and especially in when they were splitting this character, right? This Thor, that's when a lot of these problems will arise, because it's like, well, this book is still very much Thor, right? But it's a different story being told than God of Thunder. So Thor, God of Thunder isn't a volume of Thor. It's a volume of Thor, God of Thunder. It's Thor, God of Thunder, Volume 1. It's not Thor, Volume 3. Thor, Volume 3 is the Straczynski stuff. So when you look at it like that, right, even though it happened in continuity, like in that space, it's not the next volume of Thor. And that's just because it's a different name on the title. But with this character, it's like you get, this is still Thor, and then it splits into two different Thors, the Unworthy Thor and the Mighty Thor. And then when Unworthy Thor finds himself worthy-ish again, he then becomes Thor again, while the Mighty Thor just wraps up. So it's like that. This is kind of giving you the bridge, like branch universe theory, man. Like Mighty Thor's up here. Thor keeps going. Mighty Thor goes over here.
We need charts and whiteboards for this. I feel like
I just like
this is why
the thing that gets me is like legacy numbering, right? That is the first. It started in the Silver Age. We need so one member of the Golden Guys to come on here so we can have the perfect Venn diagram to talk about the Silver Age. But like those were all Tales to Astonish or Tales of Suspense or, you know, Strange Tales, and they were stories that had more than one story going on at the same time, and they were like anthology series almost, and a lot of these running series took over those books. Like Strange Tales became a Doctor Strange book. Journey into Mystery became a Thor book. So by the time that they got their own series, they kind of were just like, well, this is what we used to call it. This is what we're calling it now. But we can still do what we were doing with that other thing. So we're going to keep that going as well. So the thing that gets me is like Thor starts at a certain point, but he didn't show up in the first Journey into Mystery. He didn't show up until Journey into Mystery. What? I can't remember.
83 or something like that.
I don't know, but do you count those as Thor books? No, you can't. So obviously he's at least 3 issues behind where he was supposed to be in the first place. So I don't care. Number ones are supposed to be a good jumping on point for readers. And if they serve that purpose, I have no problem with them being called a number one. I have no problem with Marvel doing basically 12 issue seasons of their series. That works for me. I think it's digestible. I think that makes it easier if you only have to buy 2 trades to get like a chunk of a creative team. And if they switch creative teams, I'm cool with that too. And I'm also cool with them changing the name and the number of the book if the writer stays on, but the artist changes for 6 issues. I don't have a problem with that. It doesn't bother me. I think that as long as I can, piece together what's going on in the world based on what else is going on in continuity at that time. That's kind of the way that I read and collect comics. It doesn't bother me at all. I think that there are things like, just calling Marvel Comics 1000. People were up in arms about that. Like 1000 what? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Like DC's doing it. We can do it too. Hey, I don't know. I thought it was a fun concept, but the numbering of things doesn't bother me at all.
And this is why I will never miss this show, because the only way I'm going to learn how to cope and grasp with some of these things is to actually get through it and work through it with you guys and figure out the reads, figure out the chunks of continuity that are completely missing from my head on these runs, where to begin, where to delve deeper into, and numbers. Numbers is a huge part of this.
Yeah, another 90s gimmick I liked is when I started reading, obviously I was on the DC side of things, and DC had a book like this, for instance. I don't even know what happens. It's just a random one I found because it was a DC Universe logo variant, so I bought it for pretty cheap. But the issue number on this Adventure of Superman is 540. But oh wait, there's this nice little 43 here as well.
Yeah.
So it's like most readers are like, what is issue 43? Is it issue 540? Well, at least in the 90s with the Superman titles, I gave you like this little hint, like, hey, this is the 43rd Superman book that's been released in the year 1996. So if you want to get all the Superman books, so this will, like, you can get Superman Action Comics, regular Superman, Man of Steel, maybe even Superman, Man of Tomorrow, if there's a leap year in the year. That'd come out like once every 3 months. So looking at it's a bit goofy, but I did enjoy it back in the day because it allowed me to kind of run build and know how to sort the 90s Superman books. And, you know, if you read them all together based on the little triangle number there, they actually kind of, in a lot of cases, read more continuous than if you go by like Adventure Superman 541. May not exactly follow this. It may follow like Man of Steel. So I admit, once again, kind of confusing, but at least they tried an idea here that they went with for a very long time, actually. So another one of my favorite 90s gimmicks. So before I get into the fun that is the New 52 Marvel Now, does this affect the way you guys dollar bin dive at all? Because I know for me, like, I feel like I'm kind of the midpoint between the two of you guys, where Drew constantly pays attention to what's going on with DC and Marvel. Andy, you're kind of getting back into things. And me, I used to kind of be into like getting everything, but now I'm just like, I took my head off the ball around maybe Marvel Secret Wars time, which we read on here. And now, like, I look back and I'm just like, I don't know which volume of Spider-Man this is. If I was like, saw a few in a bin together, like, are they even in the same volume? Like, does that affect you guys at all when you're looking to collect runs still?
I think it does drastically, wholeheartedly, because if like you said, if you stopped or got off that train, so to speak, at a certain point, now it affects your collecting in the dollar bins, your 20-cent bins, your 20-cent books, where you could be passing up minor keys that you're unaware of because you weren't connected to that. That's where I could see it affecting myself as well. The knowledge is power aspect, where the more I'm paying attention to this, more I'm paying attention to the numbers and the continuity and how it fits, and the more aware I am, the more opportunities I'm going to create for those books to land in my collection instead of leaving them behind if I'm not paying attention.
I think that it gives me the opportunity really to find things around continuity that I already know. You know, when I dollar bin dive for like story, you know, a lot of dollar bin diving I do cover buys, you know, but if I'm going to like start a run, if I find like a couple issues or something, it'll normally be because it'll be like, oh, this is what these characters were doing when I was reading this. Let me figure out that. Now, you know, it's like the beginning of the Ultimate Universe. You know, oh, I was reading, you know, Ultimate Fantastic Four. I was reading Ultimates. You know, just for example, Ultimate X-Men. Okay, this came out around the same time. Let me, you know, fill this in. So I normally will, as far as like things that pique my curiosity, will be based around continuity that I already know, as far as if I'm trying to gather a run. Now, the one cool thing that both companies have done a few times over the past couple of years, especially, is like taking advantage of these renumberings, you know, renumber a new series, but give it a legacy number as well. And as you can see on the latest issue of Fantastic Four, it's number 22. But it's also number 667 as well. So, yeah, you get two numbers on there.
Yeah, I'm actually.
So it's like, oh, yeah, I want to tie it to everything else that I've read. Well, there are 666, Satan, issues of Fantastic Four before this. So if you want to get caught up, you better start fucking reading. But, you know, if you only want to know what's kind of going on now, you only got 21 issues to read. And if you want to know what's going on in the current arc, it's Empire. It's probably on the inside. It's Empire 2 of 3 or 2 of 4. Yeah.
So yeah,
there's so many numbers.
To where things really get on my nerves. I'll be perfectly honest. Like you get to the New 52 and you get to Marvel Now, then all new Marvel Now, and then DC Rebirth. This is where you start to see like the issue 1 on the cover when it's just the start of a new story arc, and then it's really like issue 12 or 14 and it's in the very like tiny bottom corner, so you have to lift it up off the shelf like, oh, that's not a new number 1, it's just another part of the run. So like I felt like they're trying to trick you, but what really gets me is decimal points. Like 1.5, that's fine. I can kind of understand. You know, the 0 issue's already been used up. Use the 1.5. Maybe tell another origin story. But like DC did this when they did those like Villains Month lenticulars, or like it's the worst thing that happens is you put something on your pull list like Batman, and you want to read Batman every month, and then all of a sudden DC's like, or Marvel's like, hold up, it's October. We got to do. It's a gimmick month. We're going to give you 4 books instead of 1, and maybe only one of those you'll actually want to read. So by the time you go pick up your pull list, you know, your comic shop owner is just like, hey, I pulled all these Batmans for you. It's like, what the hell is this? Like 21.4? Like, I don't want this. This isn't even Batman. He's not even in the issue. And then like Marvel had like, for instance, like for Age of Ultron, they would have like Fantastic Four issue 6. Like, oh, cool. I'm still collecting Fantastic Four. It's great. Then like 1 week later, you'd have a Fantastic Four issue 6.AU. It's like, what the hell is an AU? It's like Age of Ultron. I'm like, okay, so why wasn't that either the real issue 6 or a one shot? Like now it's in my pull list. So do these gimmicks? Do you guys mind these gimmicks, or is it getting on your nerves like it does mine?
I don't mind them. I actually kind of, there's one thing Marvel does where they'll like do like a Spider-Man miniseries. And it'll be like Spider-Man 6.1 through 6.6 or whatever. That just lets you know that where in continuity that miniseries lies. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think it's more directs you to like, if you, my shop will always ask me, be like, hey, I know you pull Spider-Man. This is a 0.6 issue or a 0.2 or whatever. Do you want it? You know, I'll get the heads up. So I never feel like my shop is going to be ordering those things for me, particularly if it's not something I'm going to want. I feel like all those tie-ins or anything like that, they kind of tie into the run. I like how they tie them into the run. I could see being disappointed if it wasn't a series you were collecting and they did the tie-in that you didn't need for your run, and it ended up in your box and you bought it because you felt bad that they ordered it for you. But at the same time, I've never really seen that as much of an issue. Like those villains issues were like 0.1s. That was kind of weird. And the AU, that's kind of weird. But like, I know they did the Monsters Unleashed. They were all 1.MUs, right? So you like, I thought it was a cool way of numbering a tie-in. I don't know. I think they probably saw it the same way. I do have an issue with them putting a giant number 1 on the issue when it's like an issue 23 or whatever. I like that they're telling you it's a story arc start, that it's like a jumping on point, but like you could just put some cover copy that says new story starts here. Like you don't have to put a number fucking 1 on it. Like I don't know. It doesn't really bother me, but none of this really bothers me. You guys seem more up in arms about these numbers than me. I don't care.
Your explanation of how that decimal system can kind of guide you on where that story arc is in continuity sheds a lot of light and makes me bring a new it forces me into a perspective of where I can actually agree with that and be like, okay, I get this. Now, with that understanding, going up to that shelf, I see a 0.2 or a 0.3. I got to be looking for 2 more issues ahead of it if I want to read this one. So I can see it being a really huge detractor for a new reader that doesn't know this. That's like, okay, I got one nothing, because that's how I approached it. I approached a lot of these things, a lot of those number gimmicks where I walk up to it and I'm like, yep, not even going to try. This is going to be a whirlwind of a headache for an hour in the LCS here. trying to figure this out. And now in the LCSs, you've got less time. There are restrictions you have to meet to even be in there if your LCS is open. So the more they do that, the more it's a detractor for people that don't have that understanding, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. Like the only time it really gets on my nerves is like when these books start to feel like filler. I just want them to produce good stories at the end of the day. That's what I like the most. And when I have like villains month variants and Ultron spin-off things, like I don't want to read those. At the end of the day, like I read them when I'm bored, and it's just like I'm out of $4, and that's when I get mad. Is when I mean, like you said, I feel compelled that if they ordered that for me, I want to help them out, make sure I'm getting my pulls. And I felt like that should have been on my pulls. Then I guess it's communication on one of our ends. But anyway, I'll move on to my next point here. So you already mentioned Marvel 1000. I had a bone to pick with that one. So I think you already talked enough about that. But I do agree. I like the Marvel Legacy numbering. I think at least, 10, 15 years from now, we'll be able to pick up that Fantastic Four copy and kind of just tell overall where that was at times. So I definitely agree with your point on that. But my last point I kind of had written down here is, do you guys think sometimes these insane amount of renumberings has negative effects on characters? And two that came to mind who constantly get renumbered. First of all, I'll start off with, which it kind of hit me today, like this character has never had an issue 100 ever of any of his titles, and that's Aquaman.
Huh.
Well, there's a reason for that.
Yeah, he's been renumbered so many times at the point where, his book goes on so long that DC's usually just like, the sales suck, cancel it, obviously. He's just never had a strong enough creative team to like will this long running existence. They say just wash, rinse, repeat. But why even bring back the book, I guess, is the main thing, instead of just keeping him like the Justice League or whatever. And the other one I came up with was Deadpool. He has 8 volumes of his book. I believe he's had an issue 800, 900, 1000. He's had all the negatives, the decimal points. But at the end of the day, I don't think any one of his volumes has actually gone up to issue 100. So is there a character or any instance you can think of where the numbering has just kind of been just, why is the numbering the way it is?
Deadpool, I think, is a different story than Aquaman, because I think the different publishers renumber for different reasons. If DC gives you a new number one, the chances that they are rebooting it are very high. DC will run with their numbering until they need to do something new to refreshen the property. Marvel will sometimes just end things because that's what their creator ends. And when a new creator comes on board, they'll start a new number one. It helps them. I don't know if it has anything to do with the way that these people are contracted, the way they get paid on trades, or I don't know why they do it that way, but DC has rebooted twice in the past 10 years, right? 3 times if you count whatever's not happening with 5G and is happening now through, death metal. Whatever's going to happen, we're going to have shiny, happy daytime Batman or something. Whatever goes on, it'll be 3 within 15 years.
Garage karate.
Right? Karate in the garage. That's really all that matters. Daytime, karate, garage, Batman. And Marvel has never rebooted. It's like they have done shakeups, right? But the continuity that has existed from the 60s still exists. How it's been viewed and what lens we put it through has changed subtly here and there. But what happened in Fantastic Four #1 happened. And what happened in, Incredible Hulk 102 happened. These things happened. Cap came out of the ice in the Avengers. That's never going to unhappen. So it's the renumberings are always different, in my opinion. Whereas, like, if you're getting a new Batman #1, there is definitely a new status quo. There has definitely been something in continuity that has been changed. Rebirth changed Batman and his perspectives from where he was in the New 52 Batman, which, even though carried over pretty much directly from where Batman was, it had to carry in the reboot of the universe and 0 Year and all that stuff. So it's like DC will reboot everything. and start over with a number one. Very rarely do they cancel a book and bring back a number one of that same book in that same reboot era. It's like I can think of like Suicide Squad and Teen Titans, pretty much. Aquaman got a couple the last go round, but one this last time, one Rebirth. Like these most of those titles will relaunch with the reboot after the crisis, and then move forward from there. Whereas Marvel's just like, it's we hit 12 issues and we're gonna put Dave on the book now, so now it has to be a new volume. So we'll start over with number one. Dude, Dave's great. Give Dave a chance.
Dave's not here.
Give Dave a chance. Andy,
sure, he's no Grant Morrison, but he's Dave.
What are your final thoughts, Andy?
I don't run into a lot of these numbering issues, and I think that's because I've just started over the years. I steer myself away from them. I'd never collect Marvel and DC long enough. Well, I've never collected Marvel long enough to really run into some of these because I bounce over to indie titles. I find myself bouncing over to DC now and becoming a DC collector and reader with a lot of the stuff they have going on. So I find my style of collecting is I follow creators and teams more, and I do follow community information and community hype. When somebody says a book is going to be good, I'm going to go read it. So I never really stick with one area or one section long enough to really kind of run into these. And I think I kind of built that into my brain ever since the 90s when I was a kid reading comics, when you had the halves, you had the zeros, you had everything else. I was like, I got to mow more lawns if I'm going to buy all these things. Well, I don't want to mow any more lawns. So
get out there and mow those lawns, Andy.
I think
lawns aren't going to mow themselves.
I think I've inadvertently built a habit into my own system where my collecting changes enough over the course of a year that I kind of run into those avenues less. At the end of the day, if you're in a position like Drew, you have the knowledge, you understand the continuity, these things are there to help you, and that's what they're putting them in there for. And then if you have a collector like me who's first time running into this certain book or this certain character with this type of continuity, it can be a complete turnoff. So there's two sides of the coin, really, and depending on where your perspective is, you could have very strong feelings one way or the other, honestly.
Well said, Andy. Well said. I think you hit the nail on the head. When at the end of the day, sometimes you just got to latch onto that creator you like and just go buy their books. Because, at least on the writing side, that's what I do more often than not. If I hear, John's, Brian K. Vaughan, so on and so forth, are writing one of my favorite characters, yeah, absolutely, I'm going to buy that book. But then they might leave the title, and then I'll probably leave the title. So that's no
Dave's
big
going to write Green Lantern. Can't let Dave write Green Lantern.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave Green Lantern season 3 # something. I don't know. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here. So I do want to plug next week's show first. We're going to record a premiere next week as well. Sorry, guys, I got to work again. But nonetheless, it's a big one. Episode 45, the Infinity Gauntlet special. So I know, Andy, you're really looking forward to this as well as Drew. So, yeah, can't wait to revisit that and see Andy visit it for the first time. I might try to read some of those Silver Surfer spinoffs beforehand, but no problems there. Those are
that's some good stuff.
Worth visiting as well, like Silver Surfer, I think 34, and then a couple of
all the crossover stuff is good in that book.
So can't wait to revisit that. But we've actually got a poll to talk about for week 46. So Drew, you want to kind of talk about the theme we've came up with here?
Yeah, it's like we were sitting down thinking, what are we going to do for a theme? And I thought to myself, there have been a lot of really great properties that have been adapted from other media into comic books. We might know these properties from their Saturday morning cartoons. We might know them from movies, films, or other television. And then indie comics, for the most part, have really run with these IPs and given fans an expanded universe. So I thought that these would be some really great titles to delve into.
Yeah, so next, we'll probably just post it as we're recording this. So we have 5 options for you guys. We got Power Rangers Volume 1 from Boom Studios. We got the TMNT ongoing making its return to the vote from IDW. That one almost actually won the time it was on. We'll see how it fares this time. We threw on Buffy the Vampire Slayer Volume 1 from Boom. I kind of wanted to do the Season 8 stuff from Dark Horse, but
I hope it doesn't win. I've never watched that show.
They're still trying to suss out the rights to the Dark Horse stuff digitally, so it's not too accessible. So we stuck with a Boom. Transformers Volume 1 from IDW. I've never read 1 minute of this series. It seems to have a big following, so I'm kind of curious to see if we end up getting any votes or reading that. And then the last one, it's a cult favorite, Firefly Volume 1 from Boom Studios, adapted from the famous Fox TV series. So, Andy, what do you hope wins that one?
There's not a bad book on there, honestly. There's not a bad bit of nostalgia for me or some great memory. So this can't go wrong no matter what. I'm excited for all. I'm excited for a couple more than others, but they're all going to be good.
Nice. All right, Andy, speaking of you, where can people find you?
Oh, you guys can find me here every Monday on Modern Men, my favorite book club show every week. You guys can find me occasionally on the Wednesday Greatest Comic Book Show. You can find me on the Thursday Andy Given Thursday here only on the Comic Core. And check out my own channel. And you guys can find me anywhere on social media, just at ComicManAndy.
What about you, Drew?
Next week, you guys can find me all week long slanging Hawaiian food to ungrateful Karens in Maryland. Beyond that, I will be gearing up, working all week long so that next weekend I can be behind the scenes at Mainframe Comic-Con. And then hopefully Buffy doesn't win this poll, or you'll find me confused about numbering and watching a Christy Swanson movie.
All right. So you can find me, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all at CWoodard19. Just did a unboxing of some Turtle books last Friday. Had a fun show on Roundtable this last Friday where we talked about the toys that made us. I think this Friday we're going to talk about the video games that made us. So I'm looking forward to that. Comics of the Atom is still on all of your favorite listening devices via podcast form. Mike and I recorded this last weekend. We talked a little bit about Spawn #1 and a lot of bit about the formation of Image and just the state of the early 90s. So I think it was one of our strongest episodes yet. So I recommend checking that out. I'll throw the link down below. Other than that, I believe Drew did make one promise, and he was going to tell us what was whispered in Thor's ear. And I think I have the answer right here.
Hey, we're best friends. Let's do karate in the garage.